I have returned. I'm the Nerd King from Band League, and today we're going to be looking at another metagame analysis for Week 7 of Kaladesh Standard. So, the bad news is, there wasn't actually a huge amount of Magic stuff happening these last few weeks. There were a few things like Chiba, but I decided to just focus on the Team Modern Magic World Cup that happened either last weekend or 2 weekends ago. So, this is the metagame breakdown. And for the most part, it's about what we would expect. There's no other here. I decided to just include everything that made it to the top 16, even if there was just one deck or something. And there was a lot of Infect, as we would have expected. There was a lot of Dredge. But there were a few weird things. The main one being Kiln Fiend. So, just in case you don't know what it is, Kiln Fiend is a colorless and a red for 1/2, and when you cast an instant or sorcery, it gets +3/+0. It has recently gotten an entire deck built around it, and then they threw in Monastery Swiftspear and one other card for redundancy. And it has had quite a bit of success. It made 3 appearances in the top 16, making it the number 2 most heavily present deck in the top 8, my bad. So then the Eldrazi aggro deck has also kind of spiked in success since 2 weeks ago. Because I didn't really talk about Eldrazi aggro that much, and Kiln Fiend, I don't even remember seeing Kiln Fiend, though it might have been in that other category. But still, this is pretty interesting. So because of its new appearance, I figured I'd talk a little bit more about the Kiln Fiend deck. So here's the deck list, if you want to refer to it. It's kind of like Storm and kind of like Infect. So if you look, it runs things like Metamorphose and Sleight of Hand and G-Probe, stormy things, which will trigger Kiln Fiend, Monster Swiftspear, or Thing in the Ice. And then it also has a lot of pump spells to power out super powerful early game plays. It's the 2 key cards I would focus on, aside from the creatures obviously, are Gitaxian Probe and Mutagenic Growth, because they are a lot of the power of this deck. This is a fairly powerful turn 3-ish deck. It can Teamer Battle Rage is kind of required, and along with one of the creatures, but generally you can do at least a lot of damage turn 3, assuming they don't do anything to stop you. And so the deck itself seems good. I think long term it's gonna need to run the full 4 of Apostle's Blessing, or maybe Vines of the Vastwood, or the ones from the pump spell from Dragon of Tarkir that grants hexproof. Something to give it a bit more endurance, because a lot of their guys die, and it's like a Delver deck almost. It has a lot of the same problems, like this careful balance between instants and sorceries. The rest of the deck is pretty straightforward, just a lot of cantrippy things or damagey things. There's one Bedlam Reveler, which is a nice little refuel. And then in the sideboard, I think they wanted to get even more late game-ish. So there's things like Shattering Spree and Twisted Image, lots of counter spells, Vapor Snag, Yun Pyro, just a lot of things so that they can chill out a little, take out some of their aggro stuff, and put in some things to give it more resiliency. So the way this deck is designed is obviously spectacular. But I think we're going to start, as this deck continues to evolve, see more spell pierces and dispels main board, like not a ton, but maybe 2 to 3 counter spells to keep your things going. Alright, so to give you a little bit of perspective regarding Kiln Fiend's power, especially in conjunction with Temur Battle Rage, it's not that hard to set up a turn 3 kill. So if you played your Kiln Fiend turn 2, and you're just playing against an opponent who does nothing, hasn't played a land, no removal, nothing at all. So you have to, if you have a Temur Battle Rage in hand, you barely need anything beyond that. Because when you cast Temur Battle Rage, that bumps up the Kiln Fiend once, making it a 4-2 with double strike. From the double strike obviously coming from the Battle Rage. Then, if you just Mutagenic Ataxian Probe or Manamorphose, pump spell of any sort, bolt their face, any 2 spells in this deck will be enough to kill them, I believe. Because either that or close. I think sometimes it does actually take a little bit more. Because Kiln Fiend plus his plus 2 buffs is 7 power. You give it double strike. Yeah, it's not quite there. Or sorry, I guess it's actually 3 buffs. My bad. So yeah, so if you play Temur Battle Rage and follow that up with any 2 spells in this deck, you win. And so because of that it makes Gitaxian Probe and Mutagenic Growth, I think, almost must-haves in this deck. They just enable you so well. I don't know how I feel about Monastery Swiftspear in this deck, which is weird to say. It's good redundancy for Kiln Fiend, but it's important to keep in mind that it's not nearly as explosive. So if you have like a Monastery Swiftspear hand instead of a Kiln Fiend hand, you have to be a bit more conservative with your spells, it's a lot easier to go all in on Kiln Fiend and go for the kill. And Thane in the Ice is like the next step up, but I think he's actually second best. I think he's better in this deck than Monastery Swiftspear, because he's so much harder to interact with. 0-4 is a nice place to be. It dodges Lightning Bolt. Obviously, there's still removal spells to kill it, but hopefully you can get around some of those, especially if you go the route of sideboarding into more counterspells or playing more counterspells main deck. And when he flips, Path is basically the only answer in the format. There are others, but there's just not that many, and it doesn't take that many hits for him to kill, especially when you have things like bolts and growths and battle rages, all that type of stuff, to vapor snags to clear the way. He ends up actually killing pretty fast, and this deck is set up to have more than just the burst damage with Kiln Fiend, but also to a certain extent endurance. So it doesn't have a lot of cantrips with upside. Like Serum Visions is an example of cantrips with upside. Same with Sleight of Hand, because they're slightly better than drawing a card. This has a lot more of the plain draw card like Manamorphose and Gitaxian Probe, but it still helps them endure until the late game. And so I haven't actually played the deck yet, so I could be wrong. But I imagine the way this deck works is you try and hold your non-cantrips, and then try and kind of burn through your non-Manamorphose cantrips to get to those 3 creatures, the 12 creatures you have in your deck. Monastery Swift Spear can be a little awkward, I think. It's certainly powerful, but it takes a lot more to get her set up. Like, you need because to kill in a turn, I think that's a good way to measure it, killing in a turn. So to do that, you start with Teamer Battle Rage, and then if you throw on a mutagenic growth, that's 6, 7, 14 damage, and then 14. It takes like another mutagenic or like a bunch more cards. It's a lot slower and clunkier, but she has a lot more sustained damage, so it's kind of balanced. Kiln Fiend, even though it's more expensive, is the hyper aggro one. The one that just, it wins you games for free sometimes, it ends things fast. Monastery Swift Spear is your medium person. She kind of grinds them down more than she does actually kill them. And then Thing in the Ice is if things have gone kind of wrong. Not too wrong, just kind of wrong, and you need to reset the board, start smashing with something bigger than a inherent 1/2. If I were to play the deck, though, I think I'd kind of want some Titan Strength, because this deck seems good, but also seems short on concrete buffs. Like, Mutagenic Growth is your only true pump spell in the deck, and I think it really just wants a Titan Strength. Like, I'd even play 3 Titan Strength in this deck. Instead of what? Probably cut the Sleight of Hands and 1 Vapor Snag. Probably cut both Vapor Snags to play a Spell Pierce in the main, or actually no, I'd want to Dispel in the main instead of the Spell Pierce. But yeah, so I'd cut the 2 Vapor Snags, 2 Sleight of Hands for like a Dispel and 3 Titan Strength. It makes me a little more bursty, but Titan Strength is okay because it gives you that pseudo card advantage. And then just counter spells. Counter spells are great, man, especially now that the format is aware of what this is. They're gonna prepare for it, and Bolt is gonna be super annoying. Alright, so I've talked a lot about the deck itself, but I also wanted to get into playing against the deck. So, when you're facing down this Kiln Fiend deck, it's important, I believe, when you're dealing with Kiln Fiend and Monastery Swift Spear, to try and kill them at sorcery speed on your turn. And as epic as it is, because as epic as it is to kill the creature out from underneath and the spells, the buffs it's given itself, a lot of this, often your opponent, when they're playing the deck, will be holding their mutagenic growth for a situation like that, or if they play, or Apostle's Blessing, or if they play a more control-y version, they'll be holding a counter spell. And so you have to try and let as much of their stuff be unusable. And so when you kill on their turn, if they are able to respond with a mutagenic growth, you're probably been just blown out. But if you interact on your turn, you can force mutagenic growth, or to a lesser extent the counterspell, and then they lose the trigger on their buff. And so when they attack. And that's just hugely valuable, because this deck needs to have every single possible point of damage. It doesn't sound like it's desperate for damage, but it's really trying to squeeze everything in it can, because I think sometimes against Kiln Fiend, you'll just die to Kiln Fiend, and it won't even be close. You'll get hit for like 30 or something. But sometimes against Kiln Fiend, it's going to get a lot grindier, and they're going to be searching for any damage they can get. So forcing them to lose their Kiln Fiend or Monastery Swift Spear buffs because they had to cast something like a growth or bolt or anything on your turn is hugely valuable. Let's see. The only problem with playing counter spells, especially main board, is that if you're playing counter spells, you can't trigger your Kiln Fiends and Monastery Swift Spears on command in order to get points of damage in. How important is that? I think here it was actually important enough for this world champion person to exclude the counter spells from the main board, but I don't necessarily think it has to be that way. I actually do believe that you could run this counter spells main board, but you can't go too over the top, or you'll just be too slow and end up essentially being worse infect, which is not where you want to be with this deck. If anything, you want to try and be better infect, because this deck gets more card advantage, more 0-mana spells, things like that. Alright, so as far as upcoming events go, we have Grand Prix Denver, which I'll be going to. It should be awesome. Standard, December 2nd and 4th. And then, if you can't go to Denver, go to Grand Prix Madrid, also December 2nd through 4th, also standard. I don't know if you can tell, but there's a lot happening this weekend. We also have the SCG Atlanta Invitational. I've been to one of those once. It was pretty cool. It's going to be standard and modern, though, so you'll need both decks. And I believe that's only if you've gotten the invitation, hence the name. So, if you were going to go, you've probably been planning on it, but I still thought I'd mention it here. Maybe you forgot or something. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Then there's the RPTQ for Pro Tour Aether Revolt. So if you won that preliminary Pro Tour qualifier, the RPTQs are happening. For more information on that, you'll have to look it up for your state where it's happening, because it varies by state, and if I listed them all, it'd fill like multiple slides. Keep in mind that if you can't go to one on 3rd through 4th, there's also going to be an RPTQ December weekend 10th and 11th. 10th through 11th. I'm sorry. And then December 9th through 11th, there's going to be Grand Prix Milwaukee, which is sealed. And yeah, so important to notice, I figure I'll mention it so you don't have to look it up later. All these 3 days are Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but the 2-day ones are just Saturday, Sunday. And so I wanted to finish by saying I'm sorry this was a short video. I'm hoping to do a longer video next week, which should be pretty cool, because there's, as you can see, a lot going to be not next week, week after next. Because there's a lot of stuff that will have happened. I should have plenty to talk about. Maybe there'll be new developments in Standard, or maybe it'll be the exact same boring Standard. Who knows? And then I might talk about Sealed. It intrigues me. I don't know if there will actually be much content there. It might be something I plan to do for the future. But yeah, so it should be pretty great. If you're going to any of these big events, have fun, and I will see you guys later. Bye.